to the Franchise Show. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a lovely week in franchising. I've had a good week in franchising. Um, Not as good as Nik's week in franchising, as you can see by his background. We'll find out a little bit more about that, but it's looking sunnier than my background. So where do we always begin? We always begin by explaining what this show is all about. Now, if you've seen it before, you probably know, and you're probably wondering why I'm banging on about it. But if you haven't, the show is all about franchising, as you can imagine. Um, but it's about a lot more than that. It's about if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a franchisee, if you're a franchisor, then hopefully you can watch this and think about maybe some things that you might be able to ask or think about. It's about inspiring debate and asking questions. It's not necessarily about answering these questions, but it's certainly about thinking about what we should be asking. Um, and we encourage a really safe space for debate. So ask anything that you wish to ask. And you know what? This show is always driven by the wonderful people in the community that we have here. You know, I began this show to add value to the franchise industry and to make this an inclusive and show where everybody can get involved in these fantastic discussions. And every week we've got some amazing people that turn up and make this show really special. So really looking forward to hearing your thoughts as ever. Now, each week we take a different topic because that's fun. And we have a bit of a deep delve into that topic. We never know where it's going to go. I write down very little. It's not because I'm unorganized, but it's great to take your lead on this and to see where we go, because that's what makes it fun. So the topic today is franchise recruitment software. Okay, and recruitment in all its forms is a nuanced and complex process, or it can be. And maybe it doesn't have to be. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful guest. It's our sponsor as well, one of our lovely sponsors, and it's Nik Plevan from etalent. So, Nik, first of all, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Hi there.
I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. You look like you're in sunny climes there. It looks lovely. Whereabouts are you?
I am indeed. I'm on a little island in the Adriatic, about 2 hours out of Split from on a ferry. So away from civilization, but yeah, that's what we like for a little while.
Sounds lovely. We've got a few people already that have joined us, so that's fantastic. But while we start to recognise people on the screen, perhaps you could let us know what sort of brought you to create this software to help the franchise recruitment process.
Well, I'm an engineer, which, as you can imagine, makes me absolutely perfect for anything to do with people. We know engineers are wonderful with people. So you might
wonder
for it. So you might wonder why I'm doing recruitment, but the reason is that I got involved in the whole people thing of business by psychometrics. I used to sell other people's psychometrics. I used to sell personality profiles mainly for recruitment, also behavioral profiles for training and development and so on. And one of my clients was using both of those tools to recruit staff. Now they're a fairly well-known jewelry chain, and they had every year 27,000 applications for less than 100 jobs. So that was quite an interesting issue that they had. How do they decide who to recruit? So they were using my my psychometric tools until one day they called me in and they pointed out to me that if they kept buying it, I would be very rich and they would be out of business. And that made me realize that the business model that most psychometric test publishers use doesn't really work in recruitment. And so that was the reason I started etalent, is to make the whole process of assessing people according to their soft skills and their behavior really affordable.
Fantastic. A great description, and something that is very necessary in a process that is very nuanced. And we'll get to how that software perhaps deals with some of those nuances as we start to talk. But before we get into that, let's recognize some fantastic people who are here with us. So we have the ever wise Simon Wise. He's very wise, you see, Simon Wise. It's very convenient that that's his surname as well. I mean, who would have thought? It's fantastic to have you here, Simon. And I know as a recruiter, Simon, as I'm sure most of you know, runs FranRec and is a specialist in recruiting staff for the franchise industry. So it's going to be a great conversation to have with Nik and to see how that software fits into that discussion. So Simon, fire in your comments. We're ready to receive them. Who else have we got? We've got Sanjay here. Great to have you with us, Sanjay. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how software can help the recruitment process for both franchisees and staff as well. We've got Katrina here, or sort of here. She said, sorry, not going to make it, on my way back from London, but didn't bring my headphones with me. Classic mistake. Not a problem. Well, watch us on mute and try to do a bit of lip reading. But great to have you with us. Thanks for your message, and you can always catch the replay. We have, who else have we got? We've got Penny Hopkinson. Now, Penny is another wonderful sponsor of the show and introduced me to Nik. So a big thank you to Penny. And you know what? I'm going to do it. This is Penny's book. You've got to get it. Manual Magic. It's a fantastic book. And it's all about knowledge sharing and ops manuals. And Penny is fantastic. So check her out as well. And make sure you buy her book. And we've got Danny as well with us. Danny is going to be a future guest talking about franchise fame. I'm not going to have to do it again because we have all the authors here today. But Danny has written a wonderful book called Franchise Fame, and it's fantastic to have you here, Danny. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and experiences on recruitment as we go through the session today. We've got Mandy here. Great to have you here, Mandy. Thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And finally, while I take a breath, we've got Malcolm Heslop here. Great to have you here, Malcolm. Malcolm is going to be a future guest on the show. Exclusive news there, isn't it? So great to have you here, Malcolm. They're still coming in, so we're still going to recognize people. This show, as I've said, is all about the community that we have here in franchising. So recognizing people that are here and bringing others up is what we're all about here. So who else we got? We've got Johnny Joseph, previous guest on the show and a franchise auditor from June Gloom in Los Angeles. I thought Los Angeles, like Adriatic, but great to have you here. We've got Jitin. Jitin was a franchisee, just aged 22. And has had experience in both being a franchisor and a franchisee. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about franchise recruitment in all its forms. We've got two more people to recognize. We've got Don Cohen. Don taught me everything I know about LinkedIn Live. So if you like what I do in any way, you've got Don to thank partly for that. He's a legend, hat-wearing legend, and great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And we got one more. And it's Jason. Great to have you here, Jason. Jason Kaber from SEO Samba, another one of our lovely sponsors. So if you want to know about your marketing and your search engine optimization, Jason is your man. So, wow, gosh, lots of people here. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions. And look, we have one. So let's go for our first question. Let's tackle this one. And this is from Simon. And Simon's put, employers are fixated with the CV alone to invite people for interviews rather than attitudes, behavior, and values of individuals. Yeah, what do you make of that? And I mean, your software must deal with some of those soft skills. And
Well, that's exactly what it does. I'm not really surprised that Simon should say that. That is, of course, the primary reason why we created the software, is because most people, that's what they want to know about their candidates. They want to know about their soft skills. They want to know about their values. They want to know about their potential. Will they stick? Will they stay? And so on. And none of that you'll find in the CV. So I've been sort of wondering for many years now why it is that recruitment agencies mostly talk in terms of CVs rather than in terms of the skills that people have. So I totally agree with Simon on that one, as you might imagine.
No, fantastic. I mean, it's interesting we start talking about soft skills, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, how does the software deal with, I don't know, what you might call a gut feel? If you're an employer or a recruiter and you meet someone and you talk to them about the role, and this would normally happen in the interview process, and you get that gut feel that you think they're going to be right. Does the software kind of take apart what that gut feel might be in those soft skills, and how does it deal with that?
Well, normally what we do is when we talk to our clients, we first of all try and find out as much as we can about the role itself in terms of the personality that might be perfect for the role. And that, if you like, will almost translate into the gut feel when they actually meet the person. However, with our software, you can actually get all that information before you even meet the person, before you've even contacted them on, with an email or anything. Maybe the best way I can describe is to look at two different types of positions and how we might go about sort of identifying each one. So let's say you're looking for someone to work in a coffee place.
Good example.
Sorry?
That's a good example. A coffee.
Absolutely. If you want a barista, you want someone who's outgoing, sociable, diplomatic, resilient, because customers can be a bit brusque at times and they've got to react appropriately. Those are really important factors for someone like that. There may be others, but those are the critical ones. But if you're looking to hire a maintenance engineer or a mechanic, none of those things are important because they tend to deal with things, not with people. So with that type of role, we're more interested in safety orientation, details, their attention to detail, following a process, working in a structured environment. Those sort of things are far more important. So I think it's really important that when we use our software, that we always customize the assessment to the role being recruited for, because that makes it so much easier to make a decision, because you know that what you're assessing is really critical for that particular job.
That's really interesting, actually, to discuss how, if even before you set things up, that you can slightly alter things depending on that role. Really, really important, because like you say, completely different for those two roles that you mentioned.
And actually, it's even more important than that, because if you were to add a particular 2 or 3 factors that are actually not critical for the role, that may sway your decision in the wrong direction. So going back to the mechanic or the maintenance engineer, let's say one was particularly friendly. Well, most people like friendly people around them, so they might go for him. But actually, the other strengths that he has may not be as good as somebody else who isn't friendly. But as we already sort of ascertained, sociability is not really that important in that role. So it's important to only assess those things that are critical for success.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, they can. I mean, a mechanic might need to be sociable amongst their colleagues, but that's perhaps slightly different to a customer fronting role in that way. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting. I mean, how does the process work let's take it first of all from uh, an employee's point of view. So you're an employee, and let's say you're applying for this barista role. I don't know why I keep mentioning coffee, but let's say you're applying for a role of a barista, and your employer is using your software. What are you faced with as an employee in terms of getting into this software, and what sort of questions? What's the process?
Well, the process is fairly straightforward. They arrive from whichever source they come from, mainly job boards, and they would go straight into the assessment and start off with what we call the minimum requirements. And those are customizable questions that identify whether they've got very basic things that you're looking for. Like it could be a qualification, or it could be a work permit, it could be a driving license, those sort of things. The things you would typically look for in a CV. And after that, we go straight into the assessment. Obviously, we introduce it with a sort of a screen that explains why we're doing it.
We may have a little problem with the internet here.
Okay.
Oh, you're back, I think. Excellent.
Okay.
You momentarily turned into a robot.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's not a problem. It's not a problem.
So then they would go through the assessment, and that, as I said, would take typically 5 to 10 minutes, and that would assess those specific factors that we think are important. And after that, they would go through a behavioral profile that is primarily intended for cultural fit, team fit, make sure they're going to work in that particular environment really well. And that's essentially the process. The whole thing usually takes no longer than 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes. Yeah, that's pretty quick, isn't it? I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, we've got a couple of questions here. One from Malcolm that we're going to deal with next, but Simon's put here, and I think you've almost answered this one actually. But you know, how do you tailor the software for individual company values and culture? I suppose again, it's like you put those in at the beginning, you know, so that culture is a fit. How do you get them into the process?
Yeah, the values bit is, I mean, we've got the ability to assess that. The problem is that a lot of clients we've dealt with in the past haven't really worked it out, and it's difficult to actually define that within the software. However, the culture thing, that's fairly straightforward. That this behavioral profile really identifies that very well, and it has been doing so for a number of years now, and that really does sort the cultural fit, the team fit, and so on.
That's fantastic. I mean, you know, we've had a few episodes here where we talk about values and culture, and values often come from an individual, maybe that started an organization, and that's turned into culture. So as long as you've got a situation where you have a culture that you've got in there, clearly the software can deal with that. Well, look, we've got a few questions coming in here. Let's have a look at one from Malcolm. And now Malcolm's put, at what stage in the recruitment process does your software work best? That's a good question, actually. You know, should you put this in right at the beginning, no matter what your organization, or is there a peak time for this stuff to happen? Oh, you've frozen. Are you still there? No, he's not there.
Well,
is he coming back? Hello, you're there? You're there. You're back. Okay, yeah. You're back. Try it again.
Yeah, it works best right at the beginning. It's really, I'm looking at it from the point of view of the the employer. They really want to know whether someone's likely to be a good fit as early as possible in the process, so they concentrate their efforts on the most likely applicants. So we put it in right at the beginning.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you know, with a lot of these things, it's better to sort of start on a strong foundation and to use all the tools at your disposal. Let's have a look at a question here from Jason. Now, Jason has put, do you have any customers in the US yet? Your advertising video mentions your system posts on job boards, one click. Is this set up for the US? Jason is based in the US.
Yeah.
Is it something that you're currently or you're thinking about working over there?
It's a little bit awkward, this, because we have tried to work in the US, and most applicant tracking systems in the US already have a direct link to the job boards, and we don't. We have a link in the UK, but the reason we do that in the UK is because we work with an intermediate partner who does that for us. I would be more than interested in finding somebody who could help us do that in the US, because the product is perfectly suited for, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's US or the UK, or indeed European countries. We're translated into 7 languages.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I mean, Jason is a very well connected and lovely chap. So I'll have to hook you up there, Jason and Nik, and you can have a good old chat about how you could possibly do that. I mean, this is the thing, you know, it's not necessarily about providing the answer. It's about the fact that, you know, that there's a possibility of doing something new and expanding things. And that's not just the questions that come in, it's for everybody here. So that's a great point to raise, and hopefully we can put the two of you in touch. Let's have a look at something that Penny's put here. Now, Penny's put the YouTube, Instagram, TikTok generations tend to choose their employers for what they can offer in terms of company values rather than salary. Although, of course, this is important, can your process detect this?
Well,
yes, it's interesting. You touched on it briefly. What do you make of that one?
I think one of the things that a lot of employers, and I'm not suggesting anybody here today, but a lot of employers I've come across recently haven't worked out, is that the days of putting an advert in and saying we're looking for A, B, C, and D, apply now, have long gone. You really have to sell your company and the thought of working for you, rather than expect people just to come and knock on your door. So one of the things that we always advise is to write the adverts in such a way that people are genuinely motivated to apply, because you are selling the organization in the advert. And after that, we've also got a feature within the software whereby in the very first screen you can put in a video, again explains why the benefits of working for you. One of the things we suggest is that you maybe get testimonials for 2 or 3 of your current employees in that video, and that would work really, really well to get people to be motivated to apply.
That's really interesting as well. You know, switching this round, that it's the process is about the franchisor or the employer really selling their business to the potential employees. Yep. Rather than picking amongst employees and choosing them. It's switching round in a way, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I think you can do both at the same time, actually.
Yes, I think you're right. Let's have a look at something that Sanchez put here. Could there be a point in the future with GDPR when recruitment software delves into applicants' social media profiles such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to access their suitability beyond their CV and interview? Social media has the potential to uncover hidden aspects of applicants' backgrounds. My goodness, yes. You know, people put their entire life onto social media, don't they? How does that work? I mean, does GDPR stop that currently?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure that it does, but It is something we've considered doing with the software, but as with CVs, I'm very wary of doing anything with AI to do with reading CVs, for example, because I think it just cause a big problem.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Ironically, while you were talking about AI, you turned into a robot then again. But
did I not tell you I'm down at the beach? This is just a robot here.
I'm suspicious now. But no, absolutely no. And great question, Sanjay. I mean, I think it would be a really interesting world if that was the case, if everybody's social media was freely available for for people to look at when they're looking at employing. I think to a degree some of it is depends on your privacy settings, I suppose, but it certainly would perhaps make people a little bit more cautious about what and how they present themselves, because with social media, we're constantly presenting ourselves to the world, and over a period of time, people get to know who somebody is. It can't really be hidden, can it, in that world? It certainly comes to light. Let's have a look at another one. So we've got a question from Simon. What evidence research is in place to identify retention rates for employees that have been recruited using software capabilities? This is a good one, because you mentioned earlier about employing people and what makes them stay or leave. Has there been any sort of facts or figures related to this?
Absolutely. One of my longest serving customers, and one of the earliest ones actually I brought on board, is a franchisee of. Am I allowed to say the franchise? Yeah,
you can. It's not the BBC. It's fine.
Okay. Well, it was a Costa Coffee franchise.
No, you're not allowed to say that one.
No, sorry about that.
I'm joking.
They've currently got about 50 outlets, and they measured their staff turnover before using us, and then we measured it again 7 months later, and it had dropped by 30%. Wow. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because people who are perfectly suited to the job, it's not a job anymore. It's what they enjoy doing. Somebody who likes meeting people and having a laugh and getting on with stuff and helping people, making coffee and dealing with customers is going to be a joy for them. And why on earth would they leave? And if also their own behavioral style fits in perfectly with the environment, the rest of the team, and so on, it becomes a pleasure to go to work. So that has been shown through research, not just through the one that I mentioned, but generally through research, that it does increase staff retention.
That's great. What a figure as well, 30%. Because getting staff, and more importantly, keeping staff, is key to most franchise successes. To have great people around you.
Yeah.
I'm always talking to people about the fact that not necessarily the employing part, but certainly keeping staff is about understanding and looking after those people. Understanding the individuals, seeing what's important to them. But if you can identify that right at the beginning, it's going to make the job of keeping them a heck of a lot easier, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a quick look at Sanjay. Sanjay's put, I worked on a previous startup looking at this, and the GDPR and legal side was a minefield. Absolutely. I mean, this is interesting, because this could possibly be another episode of this, really. In fact, we're talking to a franchise lawyer, the lovely Natalia, in a few weeks' time. So it will be interesting perhaps to touch on that when she's a guest, and get her thoughts on the legalities of that. It's interesting. I mean, I've had a little bit of experience myself. I go back to, I remember an interview years ago now, and I was asked to, I was presented with, as part of the process, a sheet of attributes or words, and I had to circle or tick the ones that applied to me. And then, and you don't know the next part of the process, you then tick the ones that applied to the job. Is that psychometric or behavioral profiling in any way? I mean, it's my own experience of it, but is that in any way similar to the process?
We would probably class that as a qualifying question rather than a psychometric assessment.
Okay. No, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. It was just my own experience. I don't know how I did with it, but let's have a little look. We've got well, look at that. We talked of Natalia, and there she is. Yes, where we can talk about all things legal stuff with Natalia. So Sanjay, make sure that you join us when Natalia's on in, I think, a couple of weeks now. And we also have somebody new. We've got Paul Sims. Paul is a lovely chap, a supporter of what I do on a Sunday, where I help anybody who's lost their job. It's just something I like to do. And he's a great supporter of that. So it's fantastic to have you here, and it's a good conversation to have in that respect. We've got to about the half an hour mark now. So if you have just joined us, this is the Franchise Show. And today we are talking to the lovely Nik Plevan from etalent. And we're talking about franchise recruitment software and how that fits into the process of recruiting staff and recruiting franchisees, perhaps. And that nicely brings me on to a question. Can your software be used for the process of recruiting a franchisee into a franchise business?
I think it could certainly be used at the early stages of the process, pretty much as with normal sort of jobs. You can identify the critical characteristics in terms of soft skills that the person has to have. And then that could be an early part of the process to identify those people who are most likely to be successful or not, and then take over from there with the usual process. I think it is a slightly different way of looking at things, because you are looking at people with, with the values, and their motivations are particularly important, probably more so than if you're recruiting a barista, for example. So
he's frozen again.
I would.
He's back. He's back. Are you still there? He's frozen. He's gone to a robot again. Let's, if you return to a moving person as we're doing this, let's have another look at a question. Malcolm's put, part of recruiting can be to add to the team dynamic rather than recruit clones. How does the software manage this? That's a good question. What do you make of that one, Nik?
Well, as I said, the behavioral profile actually does that. It depends what you're looking for. We certainly wouldn't be saying that you're recruiting clones, because ultimately we're only assessing those specific characteristics that are important. There's plenty more in an individual, so you wouldn't be recruiting a clone. You just make sure they've got those basics that you need. The rest of that individual will be different from others, and that will be fine. It doesn't work like that at all.
Sure.
I can see why people might think it, but it doesn't.
Yeah, of course, and I can see that as well, because if you're using a software system, I can see why someone might make that assumption, and it's great to sort of address it and deal with it, and to realize that the software is just doing the job of what you would do if you were sifting through looking at the CV, meeting the person perhaps, and starting to try and make those early assessments. And it's trying to bring some of that together to help filter down those applicants. I mean, you mentioned right at the beginning that you worked with a company that had, what was it, 27,000 applications for 100 jobs.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's amazing. I mean, how long ago was that?
It was a jewelry chain, and every girl when she reached 16 wanted to work for them. You know, shiny things and jewelry, and it was, you know, they applied. So that was the reason for the high numbers. Yeah, that was the reason. But as I said before, you know, it's not really cloning is not an issue here, because no. For example, we've got something like 60 factors that we can choose from, and normally I would not advise that we assess more than 10. So those 10 should be right for that role, and therefore it's important that people have those 10. But the other 40, they can have a mixture of whatever they want. So it's, you know, you're not getting a clone. You're just making sure that you've got the right person for the right role with those critical characteristics that are important, not the others. So it doesn't work like that at all.
No, absolutely, and it's good to know how that process, you know, works from both sides. You know, from the employee side and the franchise, the employer side as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're, let's say you're a new franchise business and you're looking at recruiting your team, you know, what's the sort of process you go with that new business to start trying to extract some of those values and some things that should go in to the software to help them find the right people for the roles?
Well, we would usually go through a sort of a consultation period where we would look at the various roles they've got and identify the specific characteristics for each role, and then basically recruit people according to that. And if they find, for example, after a month or so that some of it isn't working, we might refine it. But actually, in the past, it's always worked out pretty well. This isn't exactly rocket science, but it is what people will be doing manually during the process of interviewing, whereas we can do it so much more efficiently as part of the process when people are applying online, and it just works.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's replacing a process that already happens, but making that more efficient, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. I've just seen a question here. Are credit scores allowed? And no, that's not a profiling factor, I'm afraid.
But you know, again, these things are interesting, and the sort of questions that you might ask are sort of sometimes a mixture between things that fall into a legalities point of view and things that are important to know and understand. I think probably Jason is talking about a franchisee recruitment process here, rather than an employer situation. You know, if you're looking at a potential new franchisee, you know, the credit scores are going to be important within that process at some point, and it's where you bring it in, isn't it? And again, you know, we were just touching on there about the fact that a lot of people do these things manually. You know, let's take the very old-fashioned method. You put your job advert out there, and you get your 100 CVs. And what do? You sit there and you're reading through them all and trying to decide which ones you might want to invite to an interview. That's kind of traditionally how it would work. What part of the process does the software take over then?
Well, instead of having 100 CVs, you would have a readout on a screen that showed you whether they had the minimum requirements or not, very simply with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then a score next to their name showing how closely their personality matched the ideal. And that in itself can make that initial sift so much easier, because the thumbs up, thumbs down is basically what would be in the CV. But instead of looking through the CV, you simply ask very straightforward questions that people can answer with clicking a box or a button or something. So it takes them seconds, and you can immediately tell whether they're likely to be successful or not. And the next score is to do with their personality, and obviously people whose personality matches more closely to the ideal are likely to be more successful. So you would look at them in greater detail, look at their profile, and then potentially invite them for an interview.
Yeah, great. No, that's fantastic.
Indeed.
Sorry, go on.
What we call a video interview.
Yeah, you're breaking up and you've frozen again, unfortunately, there, Nik. But let's, while you're coming back onto the screen, let's have a quick look at something that Simon's put here. Oh, you're back now, Nik. You're back.
You know what's interesting is that while I'm away, I can hear everything you're saying. So.
Oh dear. Well, hopefully it's not my internet, but it's anyway. You're back now. So while you're back, that's all good stuff. Simon has put, do you build in candidate feedback and manage expectations for the candidate too?
Yep.
It's an area that is so important in the recruitment process. It's a stressful time for anyone looking for a job, and too many employers fall short on this. Yeah, I agree with this one. Is there that facility built in there?
Absolutely. One of the things, I mean, ultimately, it's the employers who use the software, but we've built a number of things into it that makes it very easy to communicate with applicants all the way through the process. And also, everyone who is rejected gets an attachment of their behavioral profile, almost as a thank you for having taken part. And it is a useful document that they can use to identify their own behavioral strengths and limitations going forward. But ultimately, we only provide the software, and it's really up to the employer how they deal with applicants. And it is something we stress very strongly, that they should deal with them respectfully and keep them informed at all times.
That's great to know. It's very easy with the software to be able to provide that feedback, and not just you've been unsuccessful on this occasion, but genuine feedback as to how their personality, their character, their values, their soft skills have come across. Because it's something that perhaps they can, to a degree, work on, or perhaps go into jobs that their soft skills are more suited for. So it's real genuine feedback that someone can get, which is fantastic stuff.
Yeah,
no, that's great. Look, we have had an amazing conversation today. It's been a really fascinating one for me, and I think that this software is going to be a real game changer when it's used with the nuances of that recruitment process. I want to thank you so much for taking the time on your lovely holiday there to be with us and answer all these fascinating questions. Before we do start to wrap things up today, Nik, could you give us the best way to get in contact with you if people that are watching this either now or in the future would like to use your lovely services?
Did that come through? You froze there for a moment.
There was there was a little bit of a delay, but you know what? I have a convenient little QR code. So if you do need to contact Nik and you want to know all about recruitment software for your business, then please scan the QR code that's on the left-hand side of your screen, and that'll take you directly to Nik's website, where you can contact him or speak to me and I can put you in touch, or find him on LinkedIn. So I want to look at that. Someone scanned the QR code. So that's working swimmingly. Well, look, again, Nik, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a fascinating conversation, and I think, as ever, it's going to add real value to the industry, and I hope lots of people reach out and find out more about it from you. Before we go, I'd like to just say a few things. Next week on the show, we have the lovely Scott English, and we're going to talk about celebrating franchise success. So that's going to be a really wonderful conversation, because there's a lot of success to celebrate in lots of different ways. So I'm really looking forward to celebrating that with Scott. And next week, I'm hopefully going to be in sunny climes. Hopefully everything will be all good, but it'll be a slightly different background for me next week. Really looking forward to tomorrow to franchising brand stories. We're going to be speaking to Liam Hobbs from More Than Loft Ladders. So we're going to see what's in people's lofts, find out what's upstairs, see if there's any hidden treasures, that sort of thing. Think of all sorts of different puns for that one. So that's going to be fantastic. Join us tomorrow, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And finally, I want to talk about franchising brand stories for next week, which is going to be again on a Wednesday for the next few weeks. And we are finding out the story behind Teslon. And we're going to talk to Ryan Armitage for that. So that's going to be a great one. Really looking forward to all of those. So join us for those episodes if you can. And until then, take fantastic care of yourselves. Thank everybody for being here as ever. You add value to this show, and it's all about you guys. So really appreciate you being here. So until next time, take good care and see you next time. Cheers.